Hello, friends and enemies, heroes and villains. Welcome to Epic Realms. Today's guest is an author and writer. A lot of his works include tie-in fiction for D&D, Pathfinder, World of Darkness, Mutants and Masterminds, and many, many, many more. Some of his recent works have been for Marvel and the Tales of Basil and Moebius, and even maybe an animated film. We'll talk about that later on down the road. Please welcome our friend Richard Lee Byers to Epic Realms. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Hey, everybody.
So, last time you were on the show, I had mentioned Marvel stuff. Last time you were on the show, you had just finished up your first book for Marvel, and that was I think it was the the Head of Mimer, right? Was the first one?
Yeah, well, that's actually not the first Marvel thing I ever did. Decades
You
ago,
did the
I
X-Men.
did an X-Men book
Yeah.
called Soul Killer, but then I thought, well, I get them when that publisher was no longer doing Marvel. I thought, well, I guess I'm done with Marvel, unfortunately,
Hmm.
because I really do like Marvel stuff. But then years later, I got the chance to do this trilogy for Marvel Tales of Asgard, and the Head of Mimer was the first one of those. It's all come out now. There's the Head of Mimer, the Rebels of Vanaheim, and the Prisoner of Tartarus.
Okay.
Are the three, and I don't know how much longer they're going to remain in print, actually. So any people who are interested in picking those up should probably go
Go
grab
pick
them
those
now.
up. Especially if you like the Heimdall character, because that's basically who it's based around, right? He's the main character.
Yeah, I kind of did a three-part origin story for him, with which takes him from being kind of just another young warrior in the service of Asgard to becoming the character from today from the comics.
Yeah.
And because when I started, the Aconite Books did had gotten the license to do these, and they, I guess, because Titan Books had a pre-existing license for
Okay.
Marvel also. They said to kind of maybe steer clear of some of the major characters, because I guess they didn't want those competing with the
Right.
Titan books about the same character. So like, don't do Spider-Man,
Yeah. Yeah.
and said, do pick a kind of a B-lister or a
A
C-lister that you think is
tertiary. Yeah.
interesting, and then do something about him. So I said, well, Heimdall is interesting to me, and he's never really gotten his due or gotten an origin story in any of the Thor comics that I've read.
Right.
So let's do the origin story. And I kind of like the idea that he has the fantastically keen senses, and I kind of thought, well, let's take that a step further, and like, not only does he see and hear things that other people don't, but we'll make him smarter than the other
Yeah.
than the average Asgardian also, and he'll be able to think his way out of problems where they just kind of muscle through. And so I like the
Well, and
trilogy.
there's been rumors now for a couple of years that they're going to make a Heimdall movie that's a backstory for him, and it's like, well, I mean, if they do, then better credit Richard Lee Byers and take that story because
Yeah, that won't happen. But
you never know. They made a D&D movie, didn't they? It's set in Forgotten Realms. You never.
well, yeah, but I mean, the fact that that I would get credited or paid
Oh,
is unlikely. I mean, if you notice in the D&D movie, they didn't credit Ed.
yeah, yeah, I know. I talked to him about that when he was on. He's like, I don't care. He's like, I don't care. It was a Forgotten Realms movie. I don't need my name there. It was a top notch, a list blockbuster D&D movie that's set in what I created. So if
There
he's
was
happy
one
with
line
it,
of dialogue that mentioned a character I created.
what's that?
There's one line of dialogue in that movie that mentions a character I created.
Really? Which one is that?
Yeah, my hero Alf Fazim, who's in
Oh,
Brotherhood of the Griffin,
yeah.
and in my Fae trilogy before that. Yeah, there's one line of dialogue which is an offhand reference to him.
That's really cool. That's a deep cut though. Like if people don't
Yeah,
know, now I'm gonna have to go back and look for that line.
yeah. I can't even tell you where it is now, but I mean, it was suffice to say I didn't get paid for it or
Right.
anything.
Well, yeah. I mean, did
But
you
there is, but I did did my character did get mentioned, which is kind of cool.
that's yeah, that's awesome. Did you watch that movie in theaters?
Yeah, sure.
What were your initial thoughts?
I thought it was pretty good. It was. I mean, I thought that the jokes certainly landed. I mean, it felt like D&D
Yeah, it felt like a
the way
D&D, like a game
I
at the
play
table,
it, where
right?
we're a lot of kidding around and stuff. So, my favorite part was where they're digging up the corpses to ask the question. I thought that was really funny.
Yeah. And that's exactly what you could tell that's the GM messing with them, right?
Right.
Or the story about like the owl bear, the druid that can shape a change into an owl bear, and there were
Right.
so many people, oh, you can't do that, you can't. The GM let her do it. That's I mean, it makes sense to me.
Right. Yeah. No, I enjoyed it. I guess it's not considered a big success. We probably won't get a sequel, but if they
Yeah.
did make a sequel, I'd certainly go see it.
Yeah, so would I thought it was great. I think it's one of those, as it sits in sales and sits for a little while, they'll probably try making a sequel once they see how much everybody loves it. That's just my hope. That's my hope. I'm just gonna keep
Well,
saying that.
it's like they need a new model for um judging whether their movies are successful or not,
Right.
because they're still looking at the big marker is still that opening weekend box office stuff. But
Right.
so many people now discover movies on like later on streaming and
Streaming,
stuff.
yeah, Roku, like so many people aren't going to
Yeah,
movie theaters.
it's like it's like what's the most recent Marvel movie from Sony? Madam Web.
Oh,
Which I didn't think was a very good movie actually, but that point aside, it was considered to be a bomb when it came out, and now apparently on Netflix it's doing quite well. So
yeah. Yeah, that's
uh,
exactly it. You never know with the streaming services and whatever. So hopefully we'll see one. Hopefully we'll see one. And then when they can deep do a deeper delve into the Forgotten Realms, and we'll see some more stuff, see some new books, stuff like that. Um,
yeah,
what are your
I hope.
thoughts on, like D&D is coming out with some new books? We had Django Wexler on a little bit ago. Did a Spelljammer book that was really awesome. Jelly Johnson is doing stuff after the movies, not tied into the movies. What are your thoughts on them doing more D&D books? And do you have ideas that you'd like to have?
Well, sure. I mean, I would love to be involved. The phone has not rung. Nobody has invited me to do that, but I'd be delighted to do it. If the people who've read my D&D book, my D&D stuff, my Forgotten Realms stuff, knows that I was developing all kind of plot lines which were going to be resolved down the road, and so if they wanted me to come back and pick up where I left off, I'd have no trouble doing that.
Yeah,
Or of course, you never know if they wanted me back. They might want me back as a writer, but not to continue with the old stuff to create something entirely new because they say, well, the old stuff wasn't doing that well, and that's why we stopped.
yeah,
uh, but either way, I mean, I love the Forgotten Realms. I'd be happy to come back if they ever wanted me. But who knows?
right. And Pathfinder Paizo also has said, "Hey, we're coming out with some new books."
Oh, and yeah, well, that didn't. I only did one for them,
Mm-hmm.
so I was less likely that it's less likely that my phone would ring from them. Chris Jackson, I think, did a number of like
He had a couple.
nautical type stuff. He's liable to get the call before I do.
Well, you still had a pretty good book, and Called to Darkness, I think, was still a really good book. And I know I've heard a couple people who have said, are we going to get another one? Will we get another one? So hopefully we do. Hopefully they call you back,
Yeah,
or
I
even
would
just to
like.
do something else, because you did some short stories for them too, not just novels, right?
Yeah, I did some short stories. They had like short stories you get on their website for a while,
Mm-hmm.
and I did a couple of those. I'd like to do something for Call to Darkness. It was I mean, a lot of the stuff, you do and you kind of subtly implant the thing where you won't have any trouble picking up on it and going on to the next thing. And I did that with Call to Darkness,
Yeah,
and it it was that book was kind of my love letter to Edgar Rice Burroughs, who I was like the writer that I loved when I was a kid, who kind of got me into all of fantastic fiction. So, people who know Burroughs will probably see their resemblance. Although there's a lot of Robert E. Howard kind of influence in that
yeah,
one
yeah,
too.
for sure. Let's go back. Did the Marvel books with Aconite. They teamed with Marvel and all that kind of stuff, which you've done some other Aconite books since then as well, right?
Well, I did actually I did
A couple
a
Arkham horror
couple.
books.
I did a couple of Arkham Horror novellas, which originally I didn't actually technically I didn't do them for Aconite Books. I did them for Asmodee Games before there was an Aconite Books,
Okay.
and then Aconite Books did a couple volumes where they reprinted
Oh,
novellas that people had done, and they in two, I don't know if there are more than two of those volumes. There might just be two, but anyway, they've got one of the novellas I did in each of those.
okay.
So
And I think
so
they have
I
an anthology too, right?
they do. I'm not in that one.
Okay.
They didn't like the ideas I sent them for that one, or somebody didn't like
Oh man,
it.
man, don't say that. Don't. Shh, shh.
Well, I mean, it's true. You don't get into everything you pitch for.
Right. Did you play Arkham Horror or play Call of Cthulhu or any of that kind of stuff? Did you play any of those kind of games?
I've played Call of Cthulhu and GM Call of Cthulhu. I have not actually have I played Arkham. I haven't actually played
It's a
Arkham
big the big
Horror.
board game.
Yeah, I haven't played Arkham Horror. I played the one. What's the one where you're trying to prevent the great old one from breaking through into the museum specifically?
Is that the Mansions of Madness? Maybe
No, it's God,
Eldritch
I had
Horror. They have so many of them now.
Eldritch Horror, I think
Eldritch
is the
Horror.
name.
Okay.
Anyway, it's set in this big museum, and like all the rooms are full of Lovecraftian artifacts, and then with this being that's about to burst through, you want to all those artifacts are kind of coming to life and bringing lesser monsters in, and you're trying to go through, you and your buddies, it's a cooperative game, are trying to go through and yeah, and collect the resources that you're going to need to keep the big elder god from coming through, and or if at the end, if he does come through, you actually can just kind of take him on straight up and try to kill him before he kills you.
Yeah.
That's not the best option.
When you're doing those, when you sit down to do an Arkham Horror type book, do they come to you and be like, "Here, this is what we want for our thing," or do you just say, "This is my idea"? Do they have to make you? Do they want you to tie it into the actual game in any way, shape, or
Well,
form?
yeah, when I did the Arkham Horror, they specifically wanted origin stories for some of the characters that you can use as your avatar in the game.
Okay.
So it was like, pick one of these characters and come up with a good origin story for him, which is, Cthulhu mythos kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So there's a character, the first character I did was Norman Withers, who's this kind of stuffy old astronomer character, and I kind of picked him because he seemed like one of the less likely people to be an adventurer, and I just thought that was kind of an interesting challenge to do, but spin him into a guy that's going out and fighting the Cthulhu mythos on an
Right.
ongoing basis. And
Right.
then the second one they have a guy named Dexter Drake who starts out as a stage magician,
Great
and but
name,
then
by the way. Anybody listening? Great name, Dexter Drake.
becomes, he becomes kind of a low level Doctor Strange, who could do some real magic to by then I did him just because I thought he'd be fun.
Yeah.
And so anyway, those are my two characters, and those were fun to write. I would be glad to do more of those too if they wanted them.
Yeah.
But
For sure. For sure.
I mean, God knows there's about a million of Avatar type characters. I can't have
Right.
covered them all already. But
Right, exactly. Do they tell you they're like, okay, this is the character, but then here's some of their starting equipment they get in the game if you want to incorporate that, or do they just say here's the character and like the base concept we have? Like, what do they
when
give
I
you?
did it, it was just like, here's the character, do an origin story for him, make a Cthulhu mythos kind of story. And I did well with the Norman Withers. I'd always kind of wanted to do a Hound of Tyndallus story
Okay,
because I just like the Hounds of Tyndallus, and
yeah,
so I figured out how to relate that, to his science background and everything, and that was fun. And then with the Dexter Drake one, I kind of wanted to do a race against time kind of story, where it's like some horrible disaster is looming, and you gotta get in there and stop it before it happens. So it all kind of spun out from that,
yeah, that's awesome.
and that was also the fact that I really liked it. Doctor Strange and characters that do magic. So to do the birth of an actual Magus kind of character was fun.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun. That is. When you're doing tie-in fiction, do you have something to prep as opposed to something that you're just, you have your story and you're like, okay, I'm going to put out this book, but then you get tie-in fiction. Do you prep differently for those?
Well, you've got to, I mean, you've got to be prepared to be a team player and modify your ideas are based on based on the input they give you. Where so sometimes just throw out an idea altogether and just come up with something new because with tie-in fiction, well, there are a couple basic rules. Probably the most basic one is you can't use up the IP because there's a lot of other products and a lot of other products are going to come after you supposedly. So it's like a lot of times I think that when people look at an IP, their first there a lot of them are based around some big mystery or some big primal conflict. And I think their first impulse is to say, "Well, I'm going to solve that mystery, or I'm gonna
Right.
take that huge conflict, which is the driving force of the whole world to its conclusion. The good guys are going to win and the bad guys are going to win. That's it,
Yeah.
and that's a natural impulse, but that's like the main thing you can't do
Yeah.
because you can't destroy what makes the IP work because it'll destroy all these other projects. Beyond that, it's like you have to be able to work with them in terms of all the other projects they've got going or they can imagine. Like if you're doing Forgotten Realms, you might come up with a great story that's set on let's say set in Thay, and but if somebody else is already doing a Thay book that year, they aren't going to tell you that you can do that project in
Yeah.
all probability.
Yeah.
It just, they're gonna tell you you've gotta take this idea and set it somewhere else if you can, or just throw out that idea and come up with a different one. So that's the difference. You gotta make sure you aren't destroying the world that you're writing about, and you've got as terms of not just blowing it like it falls into the sun, but I mean, you can't destroy it as something that makes it possible to tell more stories about it. And, uh, and you also just have to be willing to say, "Well, we don't like this idea. All right, I'll go come up with another idea."
Yeah.
And and then there are other constraints too, like with the Arkham Horror stuff I did. That's like, well, you set it in the 1920s. Well, I set it in the 1920s, and the story I did about Dexter Drake had, he had kind of a female assistant character, and I kind of played it like, his gal Friday, where she would be, where he would kind of assume he was the boss, and she would actually kind of undercut him and go her his own way. And I thought that would be fine.
Yeah.
And my female editor thought it was fine, but it was reviewed by other people at the company who thought that it was, oh no, it's too sexist. And I was like, but this is the 1920s, and it's like, well, it's not that 1920s.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we had to make some changes there.
That makes sense. So when you're doing a lot of stories, like whether it's tie-in fiction or for existing IP, um, what is something you look for when they approach you, or is it just like, give me anything you've got and I'll do it? Is there something
Well,
specific you're
I mean,
looking for in a story or an idea or like a type of game or a theme?
I kind of feel like if it's horror or if it's fantasy, I could probably come up with something that is of interest to me that fits in there. So just like, kind of like give me what you got and I'll see what I could come up with. I mean, there are things that where I can't where you just don't I just don't get an idea. It's
Yeah.
like I mean I like Star Trek,
Yeah.
but at one point where an agent I had at that time said, "Well, you should come up with a pitch for a Star Trek novel," and I absolutely couldn't do it. It just it just was not happening for
Yeah.
me. my brain would not go there in that way.
Yeah.
And um, so, but basically, like I said, if it's within broad parameters, I can probably think of something to do. Like, because there most of this stuff is not that restrictive. I mean, even if you're doing particular well-established characters, you can figure out something you want to do with them. Like, with my X-Men novel, I mean, that was everybody knew who the X-Men were. Everybody knew
Right.
who Wolverine and Storm were. Everybody, certainly everybody was going to read that book, but I could think of fun things that I wanted to do with them, despite the fact that Chris Claremont and others had written like a cajillion comic book stories about those
Right.
characters before me.
But it's a little bit
The main
different when
thing,
it's in a novel or a short story form, you know.
yeah, yeah. Before that, I'd done a couple Spider-Man short stories that were in anthologies and from the same publisher. And again, there are like a million Spider-Man stories, but I could think of something to do.
Yeah. What about the Mutants and Masterminds? You did a Mutants and Masterminds anthology as well, right?
I've done a couple stories for them, and then I did a novel for them, which is I think available if you go to the Green Ronin website. For some reason, it wasn't on Amazon the last time I checked.
Oh no.
You'd think they'd just make a point of getting everything on Amazon, but
Right.
I didn't see it. But
Amazon
but
takes such a huge cut from
you
them that
definitely get
that's
it if you go to
probably
the Green Ronin. And I did, yeah, and so I took a bunch of their pre-existing characters and did a superhero adventure with them, and it was, a lot of. I don't think I'm giving anything away, or I don't think anybody from Green Ronin would come and rebuke me if I said that their characters are kind of, well, in a lot of respects, are kind of based on existing comic
right.
book characters. They
Yeah.
spin a little bit, so it wasn't hard. It's like, I, you know, I could look at such and such a character and say, oh yeah, well that's a version of
This
character
character.
X
Yeah.
or Marvel or
Gotta watch us
DC.
saying character X. That might actually be a character in Marvel, you know?
Yeah,
But yeah, they do have kind of that because it's based on a role playing system where they want you to play, be able to build those characters, and they're like, yeah, this isn't Batman. This is, but you look at it, and you're like, that's Batman, you know. And
yeah,
so you can kind of see how to build the kind of character you want to play in, whether it's in their world or yours.
yeah. Why the character that I kind of took for my own more than any other was is they have a kind of an occultist character that's kind of like John Constantine from DC, and he's a
Yeah,
lot of fun to write about.
yeah. Do you like those kind of pulp noir? Because I mean, we're looking at Tales of Basil and Moebius, Arkham Horror, a John Constantine type character. This all seems very like, while that's not noirish, it very much feels kind of like some similarities I see going on there. Is that something you were drawn to?
Well, I kind of like I find it easier to relate and to heroes who are kind of there grudgingly
Yeah,
and are not, just like squeaky clean, as opposed to the sort of the paladin type character. I mean, I don't think we have too many of those in real life. Maybe I'm too cynical, but yeah, I kind of like the character who, the character who will do the right thing, but isn't necessarily happy to be called upon to be the one doing
right.
it. Uh, Well, and my character Alf the Zeme in Brotherhood of the Griffin. I mean, that's a character who ultimately winds up doing the right thing, but he's a mercenary,
Yeah,
and he's and he doesn't start out normally say, oh, what's good and what's evil. It's like, well, who's paying us, and then things get to the point where it's like, well, wait, this guy that we're working for is really evil. We better do something about that.
yeah,
Maybe he'll turn on him, but like I said, I just find those kind of characters more relatable, I guess.
yeah,
I
for
read a
sure.
lot of kind of hard-boiled private eye fiction, and I tend to relate more to the characters who are a little grittier, like Max Allan Collins' character Nate Heller is a character that I really like a lot, and
Okay.
he's not really. Simon Pure. He does, although he is heroic ultimately.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, you also did some. I mentioned Basil and Moebius, or Basil and Moebius, depending on how you want to pronounce it. You did a little bit of work for them more recently, right?
Well, I've done the I would have the stories in the 2024 Basil Mobius book, which is I think just out in the last couple of months, and it's called I think it's called Just Another Tuesday.
Yeah.
And I will be working on the I am working on the one that'll be out next year, which I've I've done one story, and I have to wait till everybody else does their story to do the concluding story, do kind of the finale story, because if it's like I won't have to be consistent with what they did. If like somebody cut somebody's leg off or something, I need to know that
Right.
bef- before the before I write the finale. But those are a lot of fun to do. I really like Basil and Mobius.
There's a lot of
They're
authors that have been on this show that have done stories for that. How did they approach you? Was it a connection with someone you knew, or did they just cold reach out to you, or was it like a
Brian Schifrin, who created the series, which reached out to me,
okay,
and as I recall, and maybe and God knows my memory is not the best, and maybe this isn't exactly the way Chris or Eric would recall it, but as I recall, Eric or Ryan subsequently said, we need a couple other writers. Who would you recommend? And I think I recommended Chris and Eric, and
okay?
that's why
So you were around long before they were.
I was there before there. Now Tim Zahn, I didn't, I did recommend him. Obviously, I would have recommended him. I mean, I think he was maybe actually involved at the same time, got involved at the same time I did, or
Okay.
before I did even. So, so it's kind of this kind of the four of us, and then Ryan is sort of the guiding hand over it all.
Yeah. Yeah, and
It,
it's been
that's
so it was so amazing because like there's a handful of people when I first started this show. There was a handful I could probably count on one or two hands of people that I knew that I could count on that would probably come on the show without any back knowledge of the show with anything, just because I had talked with you guys beforehand.
right.
Obviously Ed, yourself, Chris Jackson, Eric Scott DeBee, and then looking at it, it's like almost all of you have worked on Basil Mobius, and I didn't even know that it existed until one of you mentioned it. And I was like, you all keep mentioning it. So what are the odds that all of you, those very special first few that got helped get this podcast going, are all working on this one awesome project that really fits into that noir wheelhouse that I really like?
Yeah, it's really fun. I guess we would all describe it differently. I kind of describe it as if the Greymaster and Fafhrd were taking place in our modern world,
Okay.
because they're these kind of two roguish thief type characters, and then they were always butting heads with something fantastic. As for the stories I do, I draw on a lot of fringe science and unexplained enigmas. Like the first Basil and Mobius story I ever wrote was about those little gold statuettes. I think they're Incan, that they'll actually look like somebody flying an airplane.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, I wrote about those, was my first story, and I've written a lot of other stuff for the series that partakes of one fringe science thing or urban legend or other. There's in Eastern Europe, there's a thing about this car, the Black Volga, that goes around and supposedly picks up people and they're never seen again. There's all the, maybe it's like vampires driving this car or whatever. So I wrote a story about the Black Volga. So I've done a lot of that. Uh, Eric and Tim and Chris have kind of at this point taken characters that were secondary characters earlier in the series and spun them out into like full-fledged heroes on their own, and are going to do stories with them. So
Oh, okay.
like Eric has these two kind of sword and sorcery characters that were initially back in the Middle Ages, and they've been brought forward in time, but they're still kind of those guys. And Chris has a couple kind of gangster characters that who are rougher than I was Basil Mobius, I would say. And
Okay.
then Tim has Tim has this kind of supernaturally enhanced ninja and this wizard that he writes about. So, and but then we kind of braid it all back together with Basil and Moebius. I somehow I wound up being the guy that still writes about Basil and Moebius, which I kind of like because they're. I mean, I like the characters,
Yeah.
so and it's still published as the Adventures of Basil and
Yeah.
Moebius. So,
Yeah, for sure.
so I figure, well, those are good characters for me to be handling.
Yeah, they're good. And I think Eric described it as like James Bond meets Indiana Jones. It's kind of what one of them, maybe it was Chris that mentioned it, but one of them said that that's kind of how they looked at it. And I like that you say Fafhrd and Grey Mouser, because I was like, oh, that's that. I mean, that still matches up, right?
Yeah, yeah. It was a little bit more Indiana Jones earlier in the series because they would the series initially was very much about them going around and acquiring these magical artifacts, and there'd always be some kind of guardian or something.
Yeah,
And it's not quite that straightforwardly about that now, but we we still do some of that.
yeah, that's awesome. Um, Tell us a little bit. Did you watch the short film? Because I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the short film. I know you and I talked about it a little bit beforehand, but did you
Oh
watch
yeah,
that
it
with
was
Zachary Levi and Seth Park and I forget the other actor's name, but
Ray Park, isn't it?
Ray Park. Ray Park. Yeah, that's what I meant. Ray Park.
Yeah, I watched that. Yeah, it
I don't know
was
why. What I say, Seth? I meant Ray.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it was yeah, I've watched that. It's fun. It gives a fair idea of what the series is about. I mean, it's I
did did it feel like the characters when you saw it? Did it feel kind of like they were
well,
represented?
I hadn't written nearly as much about the characters back then when I saw the film as I have now. Um, it felt right then. It might not feel as right now because I've written so much about them myself. So they're I've developed them in a particular way in my mind. Like Ray Park, I mean, he was really good with all his martial arts and everything.
Yeah.
I I I think of Basil as being bigger and beefier than he is.
Right. Right.
And so and Zachary Levi as Mobius, I think was maybe a little closer to what I still think of as Mobius being like now.
Okay. 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 Um, you also worked on a book recently for Cohesion Press, right? Was it a book or an anthology?
It's an anthology, and it was actually as I understand it, done as an ebook that was distributed to their mailing list and as kind of a promotional thing. And it was for they have a series called Snafu, which is all military SF fantasy and horror. And I'd done one story for the Snafu series, anthology series before that. And then there's this. I think, I don't know. Don't people don't come after me if this is wrong. But I think that if you write to Cohesion Press now, it's like send them an email and say you want to get on their mailing list, that they will still email you that ebook for free.
Oh,
So people can get that and see what's in there. I'm in there, and Josh Reynolds is in there, and Amanda Brightman is in there, and some other writers whose names I'm instantly thinking of. But anyway, it's all military stuff. It's very action packed and exciting, and hopefully people will like
but
it.
it's also a
I
little
wrote a
like, isn't
story.
it a little like sci-fi horror military as well? Got a little sci-fi
Well,
in there, a little
yeah,
horror.
like it spans all three. You know, like my story, I would say is pretty much historical fantasy,
Okay.
straight up. And it's like mine is set during the set at the time of the founding of the city of Carthage.
Okay.
And, and there the other I actually have not read the other stories in the book, but I'm sure there are some that are science fiction and some that are horror because that's where the other snafu anthologies are.
Yeah, for sure.
Like I said, I think I don't know. I again don't. If I turn out to be wrong about this, don't people come after me. But I think that if you ask to be on this Cohesion Press mailing list, you can still get that ebook for free.
Yeah, guys, go check it out. Go check out that Cohesion Press. Is this another one of those things where like somebody talked to somebody and came to you, or they just came straight to you, or?
Well, they asked me to, years ago, they just came to me out of the blue and said, you do a story for one of this particular snafu anthology, and I did. And,
Were you
you
like,
know,
what's snafu?
well, I mean, they explained it, so I
Oh,
didn't have
okay.
to ask. And then I didn't hear from them for a while, and the other people, they were doing other anthologies, and other people were in them, and I was like, well, okay, but then they got an email and they said, well, we're putting this thing together. Will you do a story? And I didn't. Hopefully, they'll come back and ask for something else at some point. They're fun to do. I mean, it's kind of in my wheelhouse because, like I said, I do historical
Yeah.
fantasy. The first story I did for them was a story about the Crusades.
Oh,
So,
nice. So every time
I
I look at it, I keep thinking that it's like a modern military thing. So hearing that, I'm like, they really are spending, because I know I saw one was like they had zombies in there, and there's one story that had like a werewolf, and I was like, what's going on? And then I think there was one that was just straight up military, and I was like, what is going on? And then you say that, so it must branch all over the place.
I think it's, yeah, like I said, I think it's, you do military, but it could be military SF, it could be military horror, it could be military
Okay.
fantasy, which is what I do, because I don't know enough to do. Well, I could do military horror. I don't know enough science to do military
Do like
science
an
fiction. It's
alien
like, wow.
resurrection sort of situation.
I don't know. Well, the thing is that it's kind of science fiction that I really respect is written by people that know more science than I do. And I'm aware of that.
Yeah.
So like I could do probably like I could do like maybe a soft science fiction kind of thing, but I kind of wouldn't respect it after I wrote it probably. I I mean I have written a couple little science fiction things. I wrote again for Asmodee, they have kind of a cyberpunk game and whose name is escaping me right now, but I did one novella for that, and it's science fiction, but it was like the whole world and its technology and everything is already laid out. So on that level, I didn't have to make anything up,
Yeah.
and I didn't have to worry if I'm inherently skeptical about that's the way technology will evolve because the world is what the world is, and you write about it. If you choose to write about it, then you obey those rules.
When they come to you with a game like that, do you have to like sit down and read the rules and like kind of learn the game a little bit, or do you just roll with it?
Well, yeah, it's interesting. You kind of you have to absorb the rules on a certain level, but you don't have to get into the game mechanics necessarily.
Right.
It's like if you can write a perfectly good D&D novel and not know what hit points are, you know.
Right.
Uh, but you do have to know kind of what the difference between a cleric and a wizard.
Yeah. Yeah. You know the fighter is gonna last longer in a getting a beating than the than the wizard is.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's more like what they do. It's kind of funny. There's some things where knowing the game rules and trying to buy them can actually work against you, I think. Like in D&D, um, because you have hit points, if you have like a high level barbarian with a high constitution, um, and a kobold sticks him with a knife, there is zero chance that the kobold will kill him.
Right.
It absolutely cannot happen. But in real life, I don't care who you are. If somebody sticks you with a knife and gets lucky, you're going to die.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you can't, you hit points are something that doesn't translate well to fiction, and you just kind of have to ignore that part of it.
Yeah. That makes sense.
I mean, you can say that somebody's hardy and beefy or whatever, and that somebody else is like frail and emaciated, but you can't work with hit points on the level that you work with them if you're running a melee in a game.
Yeah. It's not like you can just like get stabbed more times just because you learned something about your.
Yeah, I mean, it's something else. I mean, you have the leveling up effect in games, where it's like all of a sudden, you've killed 500 orcs and your fighting level stayed the same, but you kill that 501st orcs and now you got enough experience points,
Ding.
all of a sudden everything's better. Well, that's not the way that kind of shit works in real life either.
Right. Are you
So you
planning
don't try
on
to use that.
Are you planning on doing more snafu books or any other anthologies?
Uh I'm kind of, if people wanna invite me, I'll probably do it. I mean, assuming that I feel any that I feel any connection to the subject matter at all, and, and then there's, kind of a halfway professional rate of pay. I'm actually kind of slacking off a little bit the way that compared to the way I used to be a couple of years ago. I'm now at the point where, if people come to me with, so we do something, there's a good chance I'll do it. But I'm not like chasing work anymore, like, going after writing things on spec and,
Yeah.
cold contacting editors who never heard of me and saying, "Hey, why don't you have me do this?" I just don't do that shit anymore.
Yeah.
I I I probably should. That's how you that's how I'm probably missing opportunities because I don't, but I just got to the point where I'm not willing to do that anymore.
Are there any games or board games or role playing games that you'd like to do some more tie-in fiction for?
Oh, yeah, well, obviously, I'd like to do more Forgotten Realms stuff if they ever ask me, but, sure, I'd like to do more Mutants and Masterminds or, Marvel stuff
Yeah.
if that came my way
Anything
again,
you
or,
haven't done yet?
well, I've never written a book about, like, DC characters. There are a couple of those that I
Yeah.
would like to tackle. I'd like to do a Batman story. I'd like to do a Green Lantern story.
A Constantine story? A huh?
Yeah, well, I kind of almost feel like I have done him because he
That's true, I
my new
suppose.
Mastermind story. But, I'd like to, I mean, maybe, Justice Society of America would be fun to
Yeah.
write a book about. Um, what's something I don't think? I mean, there's a lot of properties which are, I dearly love, but are kind of covered already. I mean, it's like I think The Boys is a great TV show, but I mean, it is a great property. But I mean, it's already got a TV show. It's already got it's already got the original comics. I mean, I don't really think that there's a whole lot of room there for somebody to come in and do something else with that. I
Yeah.
mean, because especially since you could see that it's driving towards a definitive conclusion, and they say that the show is this season and next season, and that's the end. But I mean, I don't know. So there's a lot of stuff that I love, but I wouldn't necessarily, don't necessarily know where you would take it other than where it's already been or where it's already going.
Yeah.
I got to do a James Bond story. Well, that was kind of cool.
Oh,
I the it was funny that at one point there was Canadian law was there was a peculiarity of Canadian law where the license to do it was going to become well, he's going to become a character in the public domain, but only temporarily. Because there's some glitch in Canadian law. So was a Canadian publisher said, "Well, while he's a during this brief window of time where he's a character in the public domain, we're going to do a James Bond anthology." So I did a little James Bond short story, and
nice.
that was fun. Yeah,
That's
that was
great.
a character because I read all those books when I was a kid and really
Yeah.
liked it.
Yeah, that's awesome. How did that do?
Hmm?
How did that do? That
I don't
anthology?
know. I mean, it's
No idea.
like most anthologies, you get the initial payment, and unless the anthology also has a story by Stephen King or something,
Right.
you don't normally see royalties beyond that what you got paid initially because
Yeah.
most anthologies
Maybe a couple
just
fans
don't
come to you at a
do that
convention and say
well.
hi.
And this and I didn't see anything from this, but it was fun to do. I'm still thinking about, are there any characters that I or any properties that I particularly
Yeah.
would want to.
Especially like any board games, because I know Aconite does a bunch of board games and other stuff as like Twilight Imperium and Magic the Gathering is done by Wizards of the Coast and stuff like that, and they all
Yeah.
have so many.
Yeah, I did a couple of short stories for Magic way back when it was just launching, and they did a couple anthologies. That was, yeah. A lot of these things I honestly don't know enough about to know. I mean, I might love them if I knew more about them,
Right,
but
yeah.
I don't. It's like, what's the what's the very elaborate fantasy. It's like a hybrid of a role playing game and a board game, and it's the name of the I think the name of the town is the name of the game. Do you know the one I'm
I
talking
have
about
no
at
idea.
all?
I don't. Maybe one of the people in our live stream might be able to answer, but I
I
don't
mean,
remember.
it looks cool. I mean, if I got into it, I probably would be thinking, "Oh god, I'd really like to write with it," but I don't know anything about it. I've never played it or looked inside the box or anything, so
Okay,
I don't know.
no worries. All right, last little section here before we talk about your upcoming events and whatnot, because I've got to know about this animated film you kind of briefly mentioned to me about. Tell
Well,
us about this.
yeah, many years ago, I wrote a story called The Plague Knight, which was published in a little semi-professional magazine called Space and Time. And then years after that, I was asked to turn into a screenplay, which I did, and it was optioned by this little Florida-based production company, and it didn't go anywhere. But the guy that did a lot of their costumes and effects and stuff had read it and really liked it, and in the fullness of time, he started his production company, and they optioned it again. And I'm told that it will be made as an animated feature film the second half of this year, so soon. And then they'll take it to Cannes in 2025 and sell it. It's not going to be like shown as one of the feature films at Cannes, but I'm told that I never knew this, but he told me that at Cannes there's a tremendous amount of film business that's done kind of behind the scenes. People, well, you want to buy this, so
Yeah,
um, that's the plan to sell it there, and I don't know.
at the
I don't know
Cannes Film Festival, right?
where it'll land, if it'll sell or who it'll sell to. I mean, it might end up on Bulgarian public access at 2 o'clock in the morning. I mean, or it could wind up on Netflix or something. Who the hell knows? But anyway, it is supposedly happening, so I'm very interested to see how that'll come out.
What?
I think it's a pretty good screenplay. I like it, and
So you
I
wrote
just
the
like I like
screenplay as well, right?
yeah, I wrote I think it's actually a novelette. I wrote the novelette, and then I was asked to write the screenplay, and I did that. And like I said, it got optioned but never made, languished for a number of years. And then this other guy came back to me and said, "Well, I've read it, and I'd really like to make it, so let me option it now." And that's where we're at. It's supposed to get
Nice.
made.
Is this the first time you've written a screenplay?
Yeah,
What was the process like trying to convert from, writing a novel or a short story or a novella and converting it to a screenplay? Because those are two completely, they both have words in them, but they're not really the same format.
I actually think that scripts are easier,
Okay.
and because you only really have to craft the dialogue well. I mean, you have to craft the overall story structure, obviously, and but as far as like describing action or describing characters or a setting or something, you can
That's the
you,
director.
you don't you have to just describe it so that somebody can know what the hell you're talking about and could put it on screen, but you don't have to describe it
Yeah.
in wonderful prose or anything. The only thing that has to be really polished is the dialogue, and I think that's that. And I think that's how I actually kind of think the screenplays are maybe easiest of all, because with comic book scripts, graphic novel scripts, you have to just be conscious that you always want to end that page with something that's gonna make the reader wanna turn the page, and
Yeah.
something that's gonna make you curious. And, with screenplays, you don't really even have to do that on the same level. You have to you wanna end every scene that way, kind of. And you do kinda wanna have that act 1, act 2, act 3 structure, but, I don't to me, prose is the hardest.
Okay. What about the length? Do you have to worry about the length, or is it like that's up to the editors to worry
Yeah,
about? Or
you do worry about the length. You have to worry about, that it's well, the rule for a film script or TV script is, 1 page is normally equal to about a minute of screen time.
Okay.
So you want to come in at like maybe 80 to 90 pages, for like a genre film, like if nobody knows who you are. It's like if you're Martin Scorsese, he can maybe write a 3 hour film,
Right.
but I mean, if I write a 3 hour film, nobody's going to make you that,
Right.
It's so you want to be concise, and with a graphic novel script is kind of well, the graphic novel script, you kind of want it to be thick enough that where it'll stand up on a bookshelf. I mean, it seems like a really
Right.
mundane concern, but you want it to be, I'm told, at least 65 pages. And there's another consideration where supposedly because of the way that a lot of them are printed, you want to have multiples of a certain number because it's like they're actually taking a piece of paper and folding it, so you want it to come out even with the number of folded pages. But I actually don't worry about that. They could put ads or pin or whatever, if I come out a little over or something. But yeah, you do worry about, like, particularly I think with the screenplay, because like I said, nobody's going to make a 3 hour movie if I write one.
Yeah. Maybe. You never know. You never know.
I'm pretty damn sure.
Gonna break it in as the next big screenwriter.
Well, and I mean, and actually, if you look at movies, but particularly kind of low budget movies or movies that are not by, not from well known people from
Hmm.
major studios, they actually seem like they're getting shorter. If I look at stuff on Shutter or Netflix or something like that, I will, or Amazon, I will see movies that are like 80 minutes, 78 minutes.
Yeah.
You never used to see that,
Right. Same with
a
TV
movie that was
shows.
less than.
A TV show used to be 22 episodes. Now it's like 4, 5.
Although in TV, you've got kind of the countervailing trend that all TV used to be very episodic, or pretty much all TV. Now, at least on streaming, which is kind of what I watch, there's a much more greater emphasis on long storytelling,
Yeah.
where it's like everything, like a season pretty much tells one story. Although, I mean, there may be lesser stories in there that kind of break it up. It's like, well, Supernatural was a series like that. I mean, you had the individual cases, but
Yeah.
in that
It was
one
kind of
season there
episodic,
was
but
an
kind of
overarching
not.
threat.
Yeah.
Hmm?
It's kind of episodic, but kind of not, and still has, yeah, the
Yeah.
overarching
And
overarching
now
threat.
you've got stuff that's like really not episodic. Like I mentioned, The Boys, that's really not
Right.
episodic.
Game of Thrones and
Yeah, Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon.
mm-hmm, for sure. You've got some upcoming appearances, some conventions coming up, and I want to start off with talking about Gen Con because you've also got a story you've written for Gen Con for the Writer Symposium, yeah?
Yeah, I'm one of the people that's invited to the Gen Con Writers Symposium, and they decided that they were going to put together an anthology this year, and everybody who was in the symposium was invited to submit a story, and they took mine, so I've got a little piece in there. I I don't know who else is in it because I haven't seen that information. Tomorrow they're going to do a cover reveal online and I kind of wish I'd already seen that, because maybe the names of some other contributors are in the cover, and I could
Right.
mention that. I don't know, but I assume that if you look at Gen Con Writer Symposium information and look at who's coming this year, you get to, you feel, okay, well, that guy's probably in there.
Yeah. Well, there's a handful of people that are usually part of the Writer Symposium. A lot of people we've already mentioned today. So,
And
and
I think
you're
Maurice Broadbus has been there pretty consistently the last few years.
I
It's
th-
just as one example.
yeah, and Ed, Eric, yourself,
Yeah.
Chris has been
I
there.
don't, I don't know if Eric's going this year or not.
Yeah, I don't
I know
know.
Ed is going. I know Ed is going to Gen Con. I don't know if he's technically part of the Writers Symposium or not.
Okay.
Because Ed at Gen Con, he doesn't have any trouble filling the
Right.
schedule with appearances of one kind or another. Everybody wants to see Ed. So
Right.
I don't know if they dragooned him into doing anything with the symposium or not. Maybe.
Yeah. Well, and I think it was 2 years ago now that you and I met and chatted for a little while at Gen Con and got to hang out. It was that's where I met Aaron Evans the first time,
Yeah.
and hung out with Eric and Chris a little bit as well. So it was a good
Yeah, I
time. And
know
I
Chris.
guys, you got to go check out Gen Con if you've never been to Gen Con. It's a great show, and you get to see all these amazing authors.
I know Chris is going to be there this year. I'm pretty sure he's going to be there. And he's easy to find when he's not doing panels with the symposium. He's in the authors avenue, I think they
Yeah,
call it, where
selling all his books, peddling
it's so
them.
much. Yeah, I admire people who have the wherewithal to do that. I'm not that way, but the people Chris does it and does well at it, as deservedly so, because his books are well worth reading.
Yeah.
And,
You're also going to be at Dragon Con coming up, right?
yeah, I don't know what I haven't sent me my programming stuff yet, so I don't know what panels I'm doing there, but I'm presumably do something. The last time I was there last year, they had me do something. They have what's called a writer's track, which is for, if you want to learn about how to write, you come to that. I was in that, and I was in the horror track. I've never cracked the fantasy track on that that convention for
What the
some reason.
heck?
I go figure, but I'll be but I imagine I'll be in at least the writer's track and the horror track again this year.
Okay. Cool. And of
Yeah.
course,
They promoted me from attending professional to guest, so I guess that's a good sign. Because if you look at DragonCon, they've got four tiers of people, or they've got tiers of people. They've got featured guests,
yeah.
they have a guest, then they've got attending professionals. Well, way back when, years and years ago, I used to be a guest, and then I kind of got demoted to attending professional, and now I'm back up to guest this year. So
Yes.
I suppose that's a positive
You're
thing.
back. You've also got your Necronomicon con, like
Hmm.
convention people. If you're listening, it's not a giant book, but it's obviously it's the Necronomicon in Tampa, and that's in September, correct?
Yeah, it's September 27th through 29th, I think. It's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, whatever dates those would be. If I'm off by a day, that you can make the adjustment. But yeah, the SF club that I'm in puts on that convention, so I'll be there, schlepping stuff in and out Thursday evening and Sunday afternoon, and then being a guest in between.
Nice. People can find you online. You're on X/Twitter as R Lee Byers. They
Hmm.
can find you on Blue Sky at Richard Lee Byers.
Hmm.
And you've got a Facebook profile page /R Lee Byers as well. That's people can join
Yeah,
and follow you there.
yeah. I'm also on let's see, Counter Social now, and what's God, I can't, Mastodon, that's the one.
Mastodon, yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of the dirty little secret of it all is it's whatever platform you're looking at, it's all the same shit, I'm like, yeah. If people have the choice, I recommend that they follow me on Facebook, because I probably put more. There's probably some stuff that goes up on Facebook that doesn't go anywhere else.
Okay.
But basically, whatever platform you follow me on, you're going to see the same stuff.
All right. Awesome. Well, thanks. Please stick around. People, we're going to do some of the live stream Q&As here in a little bit. Get your questions up in the chat or comments, and we'll get to them here after the podcast is over. Coming up July 1st, renowned artist in D&D, Magic the Gathering, Warcraft, and many, many more amazing artists. Todd Lockwood's going to be joining us. That podcast will be available for download on July 2nd. And people in the live stream, that's going to be a late one. That's going to start at 10 p.m. Going to be a late one that day. Also coming up, James Lauder, Olivia Black, Leanne Merciel, and Mark Muir, also paranormal show host, lead investigator, and author. My friend Dave Schrader is going to be returning as well. So please remember to rate, review, follow, subscribe, wherever you're getting this. Make sure to follow us there. It helps us, and it helps our guests like Richard Lee Byers. Please go ahead and tell all of your friends about it. Tell your family about it. Spread the word. We need all of you to help us out to grow and get bigger. So, for Richard Lee Byers, I am Nick, and thank you for listening to Epic Realms.